Of all the genres out there, fantasy may be the one that places the most emphasis on setting, and it's the most versatile when it comes to the flexibility its setting offers writers. A well-crafted setting can be a valuable tool that writers can use to support the character's development throughout the story. Now, high fantasy often has a huge epic scope and a world with a lot of depth, so as a fantasy writer, you have a lot of work to do, but understanding how to utilize setting as a tool to develop a vibrant world and characters without distracting the reader from the journey is vital for writers to maximize setting as a storytelling element. One established fantasy author who's talked about his story crafting methods in great detail is Brandon Sanderson. In his class Writing for Science Fiction and Fantasy at Brigham Young University, he discusses world building and gives practical strategies to implement his methods. And one of the methods that he talks about is the iceberg method. That's what we're going to be discussing in today's video. This video is sponsored by GlassesUSA.com. Have you been searching for an affordable pair of glasses? Then look no further. If you don't know, GlassesUSA.com is one of the biggest eyewear retailers in the US, offering thousands of sunglasses and eyeglasses such as Ray-Ban, Oakley, Gucci, and so much more. And the best part is that glasses start at only $39, which is up to 70% off retail prices. And you're in luck because there is a crazy exclusive deal waiting for all of my followers if you use the links in the description box. If you follow my channel, you probably know that I spend a lot of time in front of my computer editing videos, and I have been looking for some new prescription blue light blocking glasses, and GlassesUSA.com offers a collection of advanced blue light blocking lenses. And guys, you want to be protecting your eyes from blue light because they will help reduce your eye strain, it's going to help decrease headaches, and it's going to help you sleep better, and overall just help productivity. Now I get it, looking for a new pair of glasses online can be very overwhelming. There's just so many options, and GlassesUSA.com has some really great tools to help you find the perfect pairs, such as their AR try-on, which I used to find my pairs, and it was very helpful. And it's completely risk-free. They offer free shipping, free returns, and 100% money-back guarantee within 14 days. Now, GlassesUSA.com is offering a crazy exclusive discount on top of any current coupon code they have on their website for my followers for the next 24 hours. So make sure to use the links in the description for more details. And again, thank you to GlassesUSA.com for sponsoring the video. Okay, let's get into Sanderson's iceberg philosophy. Now, Sanderson encourages us to think of our worlds as an iceberg.
The iceberg. This is what you show in your book, and this is how much you know.
The tip of the iceberg is the world building that's explicitly explained and defined, while the rest of the iceberg is the world building that is assumed by the reader or implied by the author, but not expressly defined.
The iceberg philosophy is you extrapolate. You spend a lot of time and you build yourself a nice world book. And you are then able to answer some of these questions about your culture and setting so that as you're writing, the reader gets the sense, oh, the author is several steps ahead. I believe that this is real and the characters are living in a world that exists beyond the page.
According to Sanderson, the iceberg method allows writers to create a world that's believable and immersive without overwhelming the reader with unnecessary details. By only revealing the tip of the iceberg, writers can imply that there's more to the world than what's explicitly stated in the text itself. This basically enables writers to maintain that suspension of disbelief and also prompts them to consider which details are necessary to include in the story. By carefully selecting the details to reveal, the writer can create a rich and complex world that's grounded in believability and consistency. Now, V.E. Schwab shares a similar perspective on world building, describing it as looking through a window. I give my readers this window through which to see my world, and they get a limited perspective into that world, but the information that they get allows them to infer things that they cannot see. Now, this avoids contradicting what the reader has already envisioned, and it also leaves room for the writer down the line to expand their world building. While not enough believable detail is going to be detrimental to the reader's immersion, so is the opposite. Sanderson warns against the temptation to show off the entire iceberg, as this can detract from the story's overall impact.
That's the problem with having an iceberg, is that oftentimes you want to show it off. You want to be like, I've got an iceberg, here's the whole thing! And that's real boring real fast in a fantasy novel.
Fantasy offers a level of control that can be tempting to writers to include excessive details, just for the sake of being immersive and vast. However, to avoid this pitfall, it's important to understand how the world building complements the story. Screenwriter, director, and author John Truby, in his book The Anatomy of Story, 22 Steps to Becoming a Master Storyteller, says that setting is a complex and detailed web in which each element has story meaning, and is in some way a physical expression of the character web and especially the hero. The world building doesn't happen in isolation, it occurs simultaneously with the development of characters and plot, all interwoven to create the story. V.E. Schwab regards world building and setting as the first character to focus on. She says, "I look at world building and setting as a character. Not only that, I look at it as the first character. A lot of other writers will start with a plot or character, and I might start with seeds, but the thing that I develop before anything else in my story is the world." So basically, setting is not just the backdrop for the characters. It should have enough attention put into it as the character or plot development. Elizabeth Nunez says the emotions and conflicts characters experience can be made more vivid by the setting that writers choose. The setting can make readers really invested, and if they're not invested, then it's gonna break that suspension of disbelief. The concept of suspension of disbelief refers to a reader's willingness to temporarily accept a fictional work as reality, even though they know it's not. Now for us fantasy writers, this requires not only bringing the reader along with the characters and the plot, but also creating a believable, fantastical world. Now obviously, it's already going to be easier for a reader to suspend their disbelief when picking up a fantasy book, because they're expecting a new magical world. But the writer still has the job of keeping them in this state as more fantastical elements are introduced. One of the biggest challenges in achieving this is the temptation to provide excessive exposition, which can result in cumbersome and dull writing. Now, Elizabeth Nunez, in her article on how setting shapes story in volume 97 of Writer's Digest, says, "In fiction, details matter. Details allow your reader to more fully enter the world you create, to suspend disbelief, and most important, to connect emotionally with your characters. But they can also encumber the reader if they're not relevant to the story." Now obviously some of this is a matter of the reader's taste, but the author should be paying attention to the intended audience. If you're writing for middle grade or young adult, a lot of the time the descriptions might be a bit shorter and the pace is a lot quicker so that the story keeps up its momentum. If you're writing for adults, you may want to put more effort into the vivid descriptions of the setting, but again, this is all up to personal taste. Neither's better than the other. Really, you just want to try to keep your readers engaged in the story.
Your reader's going to hit this point where they are an expert in your world, where they understand all the names and terms and things. And your learning curve is how long it takes them to become that expert. You're going to want to decide what your learning curve is for your book. If you're Steven Erikson, your learning curve looks like that. If you're writing most middle grade fantasies, you want it to be really shallow.
Joe Patridge explains in his essay on writing setting for science fiction, since the reader is being asked to live in a completely different setting than he is used to, the writer uses scientific accuracy as a method of obtaining that willing suspension of disbelief so necessary to fiction. In fantasy, you might not be relying on scientific accuracy, but the purpose of this statement still remains. You want your world to feel like it actually exists, so there should be natural and cultural laws that are consistently obeyed. Now, to create a rich, believable setting, it's not enough for fantasy writers to just pile on a bunch of details and exposition. Rather, the key is to ensure that each detail serves multiple purposes, like developing characters and advancing the action of the plot. Historical fiction author Max Bird uses the novel Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe to discuss his rules for setting. The reader does not begin by seeing Crusoe's island all at once, as if on a static map or from an aerial view. On the contrary, slowly, inch by inch, we push aside the overhanging leaves and branches, shade our eyes, and follow Crusoe's wary, tentative footsteps deeper and deeper into the island. Writers have the job of gradually guiding the reader through the process of learning this new world, avoiding heavy-handed exposition and instead gradually revealing details as they're necessary. But how does a writer decide which details to include and which to leave out? That's the question, and it can be a challenging task, but really it just comes down to your personal project, your personal story. It's going to be different for everyone, but there's some general things that writers can keep in mind. First off, as mentioned, writers should consider how the world building relates to character development. What specific aspects of the setting are crucial to the character's journey throughout the story? Writers should try to include aspects of setting that naturally stem from the hero's journey. In her book on writing, titled Bird by Bird, author Anne Lamott describes setting as being about memory. Every room gives us layers of information about our past and present and who we are, our shrines and quirks, and hopes and sorrows. Writers can actually use the setting to characterize the characters. They can choose details that reveal their personalities, their heritage, likes and dislikes, and how the unique culture and landscape that they grew up in affects all of this. Now you may want to ask the question, does the detail relate to what the point of view character is doing or discussing with someone else? Will this detail be important in the next few paragraphs or next few chapters? Now, a reader paying close attention could actually get a really good payoff much later if this is done really well.
If you give a couple of good payoffs, if you say, it's one of these things, like if you're paying detailed attention, you will notice that, this certain aspect of the setting becomes a very important aspect by the end of the book. The reader's like, wow, I feel rewarded for paying attention to what you were doing, therefore I will pay more attention in the future to these things.
Can you reflect the depth of the setting without going into excessive details? For instance, you don't need to describe the exact population of a city, you can merely describe the city as sprawling and bustling with people. Are you telling the reader some facts, or are you describing what the character is interacting with or seeing? Some writers can get emotionally invested in all the details and want to show them off, but it's important to not self-indulge in the world that you create. Author John Lutz writes, creating character is one of the most important aspects of setting. Remember, in most cases, you're not merely describing background or surroundings, you are describing your protagonist's perception of those surroundings. The same setting might convey two entirely different moods to two different protagonists, depending on the particular character or story situation. Now, all of this is not to say that every single detail needs to be important to the plot. Obviously, you're going to want to use details to deepen the believability of your world. It's just up to the writer to distinguish how much is too much and to decide which parts are essential to the story and which should remain unseen, like the hidden parts of an iceberg. Now, in my last writing tips video, I had some comments from people thinking I was trying to say there's no exceptions. No, of course, there's always going to be exceptions, and really you can write however you want to write. For instance, Robert Jordan, one of my all-time favorite authors, author of The Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time has a lot of detail. It has a ton of exposition, and I would say it could have used a trimming here and there, but I still love it. I think it is fantastic. I think it is one of the greatest epic fantasy series out there. The main key takeaway to remember is that no story element exists by itself. You should be trying to tie all of these intimately together to create this big grand tapestry that is your story. So yes, there's exceptions. I am making these videos to try and share some tips that I found useful, and hopefully some of you will find useful as well. But you can feel free to ignore them and write how you want to write. That's perfectly fine. But if you did find this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you subscribed or dropped a comment. That helps out the algorithm so much, and I really appreciate it. If you want to join a fun community of fantasy lovers, make sure to join my Discord server. Also, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of my patrons and my channel members. You guys make these videos possible. I appreciate you so much, and I'll see you guys next time.